Good afternoon and welcome. It's Oisin here from iReach. Thank you for joining us for the next 30 minutes or so, looking at the first in a series of briefings on Generation XYZ. Before I bring you through the agenda, I wanted just to give you some pointers on the webinar software we're using. So you should be able to see this presentation on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a white panel which gives you access to some tools such as messaging, or if you want to ask questions, which we can come back to towards the end of the presentation. To maximize the size of the screen for the presentation, if you go to the top right part of the presentation screen, you'll see a double arrow. So if you click that, it'll zoom the slide to fill the presentation space, so that black box on the left hand side, and then you should see a right pointing arrow. If you click that, it'll close down the chat window and it'll expand the presentation to the full size of your PC screen. So hopefully you can hear me okay. You get full-size screen, and we'll bring you through the presentation over the next 30 minutes, and you can reopen your chat window if you have any questions towards the end of the presentation. So I'm going to bring you through 5 key sections. Some are a little bit detailed and I'll zip through pretty quickly. The slides will be available afterwards, so you'll be able to look at them in a little bit more time. And we're going to look at media consumption and devices across the generations. We're then going to look at how they use and the type of social media they engage with, changing attitudes to privacy and policy, and again some clues to brands if they're engaging with digital or social media campaigns, some call outs just to be careful about. And then towards the end we're going to look at trust in media. We've just finished some research on influencers we're going to share with you, which I think is quite useful as that remains popular for some brands and for some age groups. And then we'll just give you some pointers to take away with you at the end of this session. Just a very quick introduction to iReach. For this presentation and for a lot of the work we do, we align our research methods with different media, be it paid, earned and owned. We've built over the last number of years our consumer decisions panel, which now exceeds 40,000 members, and we use these panels for all our research, be it qual, be it quant, be it phone, online and face-to-face. We've also built specialist panels. We have a business panel, which is 9,000 business decision makers. We have a youth and teen panel, which we talk to age groups under the age of 18, and we have specialist panels, including mums with infants. We run regular surveys, and our most popular methodology is our consumer omnibus, which runs twice each month, and each wave we deliver 1,000 responses on a nationally representative basis. A lot of the work we do with brands includes media effectiveness, ad testing, concept testing and so on. Other tools we use regularly are our video at home service, where we can engage with consumers and families at home over webcams and video technology, and we also run a lot of telephone or KT projects, particularly for customers of many brands that we work with. Because we have such a huge community, we built our own research community platform called iReach Conversations, as well as providing a tool or a platform for our members to check for surveys, to check their awards and so on. It also allows them to engage with different types of research, be it online focus groups, be it discussion forums, idea generation and so on. We also support our clients in usability, customer experience and usability experience projects also. So to launch into the generations, I just wanted to give you a quick definition of each of the key generations under consideration today. Starting with Generation Z, so the youngest age group, so born between 1995 and 2012. So coming of age, or coming into their early 20s, currently around now, I suppose, on average. And what we've done in this particular instance, because it includes ages 7 to 17, we've excluded them from this analysis. So the analysis you'll see will be from a smaller cohort of the overall Generation Z. So some of these, and this group will continue to grow over the coming years as those younger age groups hit 18 and move into, third level education, into the workforce and so on. So while it's only a 500,000 population numbers currently, that number will continue to grow as this age cohort evolves and in essence gets older. Generation Y, the next group, and that has been of huge interest to many brands because it includes our millennials, coming of age around the late 90s into the early 2000s, and they really are at that interesting life stage for many brands in terms of well into their careers, finished college, probably getting onto the property ladder, having their families and so on, and this totals just over 1.2 million in terms of population, and a reasonably balanced split across gender. And you can look at these figures in more detail, and you can see in terms of rural and urban splits also. A final group, a small aging group, which unfortunately includes myself, our Generation X, and we've been through it all, both the recession and lots of other interesting times, and this group totals just over 700,000 adults in the Irish marketplace. Just for completeness, we wanted to also include the rest, so the bloomers as we call them, or as defined as a generation, and they're those that are over 53. Again, quite a large population number of 1.2 million. Sometimes are now fitting into silver surfers and lots of other terminology in terms of that slightly older age group. So they're the generations, and what we'll do is over the next number of slides bring you through each of the generations and how they consume media, the devices they own, and that'll evolve then into they engage with social media, brands, and their trust in different advertising platforms. So this slide I want to just use as much as an introduction to this first section in terms of the slides. So what you see here is, for example, with smartphone, we see that of all the participants in the survey, 91% have smartphones. Highest amongst Generation Z, 98%. You'll see Generation Y, Generation X, and for the sake of completeness, even though we're not really considering them today, we include the bloomers number. The reason we do that is that some of the all totals won't make any sense if the bloomer number isn't there, so that's why we just want to make sure that people can see where the all number comes from. So we see own devices across laptop, smart TV, less popular devices or less common devices such as game consoles and e-readers. Again, just to highlight a couple of variances just on these two, you'll see that the game console have a higher penetration of those younger age groups, Generation Z, lower among the Generation X and bloomers particularly, and then the flip side of that you'll see with e-readers and Kindles, a higher penetration of those older age groups. So we'll just try and pull out some of those key differences in this deck, but again, you will have these slides to look at in more detail. Devices used across any media, again, smartphone being the most popular, laptops, and again what we're trying to really track is kind of your more traditional TV and radio also. And one of the themes you'll see from the next set of slides is really the evolution of smart TV, how it's becoming more popular both for consuming regular TV but also for being able to play online players, online content, subscription services, and so on. And we'll see again a common theme moving forward. The popularity of car radio is still very strong, particularly amongst those older demographics, and then traditional radio also, and how it's been consumed slightly differently, which we'll look at in a couple of slides. In terms of all the devices used, we see, as I said, radio. And now we're looking at the use of social media platforms. And again, key variances you'll see here for those Generation Z, you'll see YouTube being quite low. Quite high amongst Generation Z. Particularly Instagram, we've seen it really evolve over the last couple of years as a go-to choice for those younger age groups, and particularly for content sharing because it's very visual, for engaging with brands and influencers again because it's very visual, and then Snapchat as their go-to communications platform in terms of sharing messages and so on. And then we see obviously the importance and the popularity, which is really strong on the likes of Facebook and Twitter also across the different age groups. Communications, again we see email being really popular and strong across those older age groups. But again, we see WhatsApp being quite solid across Generation Z and Y, strong engagement with Facebook Messenger across those younger age groups, Generation Z, and then we see a mix of different tools such as Viber, voice calls, video calls growing in popularity across the Generation Zs, particularly when we look at things like Skype and other video-based services. Use of TV and streaming, and this is one that a lot of commentators focus on, and again I think what you see here is really quite quite strong and quite stark in terms of the different platforms that Generation Z are consuming content. So we start with TV, 66% compared to 86% of Generation X. We look at online content sources, 63% against 27% in terms of those two polls in terms of content and how it's consumed. Subscription services, 54% against 27%. So we see really strong differences in terms of how content, particularly TV content, is being consumed by Generation Z, which is really at poles against the more traditional methods of consuming TV, which is normally through a TV set. We look at also news and information sources, and again we wanted to just track both online news as well as newspapers. And again we see here, as the ages are older, right up to bloomers as the highest consumers of newspaper content as well as news articles, and then we see the lower elements of consumption across online and TV amongst Generation Z, followed by Generation Y. We've seen really significant changes in terms of how music and radio is being consumed. The massive growth of Spotify and music streaming services. 86% of Generation Z using online streaming. YouTube streams music, obviously Apple, so there's lots of choices and growing all the time. But then we see the flip side, the highest consumption of radio through traditional methods across the older age groups, particularly the Generation X and the bloomers. And a figure that surprises me, what I would say is reasonably low penetration of podcasts, even though there are so many different choices now, even just replaying a radio program or even TV programs being produced for podcasts, quite low amongst the Generation X and bloomers, but in a reasonable proportion of those younger age groups listening to them, but again lower overall than I certainly would have expected. Key themes we're seeing in terms of watching and devices for watching TV. Regular TV remains strong across X and Y, but again we see real shifts in terms of smart TVs, which I find quite interesting because smart TVs also support streaming services, players, as well as on-demand content and box sets and so on. So we're seeing a real growth in that area there. We know from a range of different studies we do on how much TV is being consumed, particularly by Generation Z, using smartphones and smart devices and tablets and so on, but particularly even amongst the genders within Generation Z, we see 2 times the numbers of females consuming TV on their smartphones compared to males. Males are more likely to use regular TV or smart TVs when consuming TV content. And again, you'll see the theme across the Generation Zs in terms of consuming TV on PCs, laptops, iPad devices, and even game consoles. I know over the last number of years this concept of what we call dual screening. So what are people doing if they're watching TV? And what we see here is it's probably not as high as many commentators would suggest, but there is a lot of activity that goes on while the TV is on in the background. Facebook, you can see, is quite consistent across the age groups. Doing emails, quite high amongst those older age groups like myself, Generation X, to catching up on emails at home while the TV is on in the background. WhatsApp from those younger age groups, Messenger service, those younger age groups, and again particularly the likes of Instagram. You see that at 45% of Generation Z. So there's definitely plenty going on, and it is an interesting theme to consider when running campaigns, particularly if you're integrating TV, radio, as well as social media campaigns. Just a similar view in terms of watching subscription or on-demand TV. I think that's why I wanted to highlight the smart TVs with 34% across all age groups. And again, quite interesting, you can see here right up to 43% of bloomers, so and Generation X. So even those older demographics are moving to those smart TV technologies to give both the best of both worlds in terms of traditional TV as well as new TV sources. And as I've mentioned already, the smartphone, and again, quite what I was again surprised with, reasonably lower numbers in terms of iPad and tablet devices. Radio, again, an interesting statistic, the popularity still of car radio, particularly across all age groups, quite high amongst those Generation Z, maybe driving in and out of college and whatever, driving to school, and then traditional radio you see quite high amongst those older demographics. Smartphones, again, high amongst those Generation Z, and reasonably low, I would have thought, across those Generation X and those bloomers. And then other sources, laptops, regular TV, and then smart TV separately here. So again, so laptops we see, particularly amongst Generation X, reasonably compared to the other generations, a reasonable number in terms of listen to radio on a laptop, and that could be again in an office, outside of work, and so on. So that's a quick run through on some of that social and technology consumption issues. And what we want to do then is look at exactly how the different cohorts are engaging in social media, what they think of it, why they're using it, and I suppose some of the evolving concerns that social media is generating. So we ask, and this is a series of statements we presented to our survey participants, and just to give you the background to it, so it's really a combination of a wide range of different studies we've been using and data we've been gathering across our omnibus. And when we look at the sample size, we're looking at almost 6,000 participants across the total survey, so a vast amount of robust data just to share with you on that. So we look at Generation Z, first thing in the morning, 55% are looking at social media first thing in the morning, and we see particularly with Generation Z, they're the ones that consume social media right throughout the day at a higher level than any other of the cohorts we're looking at or the other generations. Why they're using it, so yeah, we present a statement, do you agree or disagree, that is makes me feel more connected to my friends. Again, reasonably strong figures across all the generations, but again particularly across Generation Z and Generation Y, and they've evolved into and been the early adopters of social media, particularly Generation Y, and becoming part of their mainstream method of communication and engagement with friends, Generation Z. So they're very much grown up on social media and the different social media platforms. Diversity is a really interesting one here, where we see particularly Generation Z being able to engage with a more diverse and a wider mix of people than maybe the older generations like X and Bloomers, and again a particularly strong number for Generation Y. So again, seeing the different models of communication, not just with people you know, but reaching out to people you don't know, or people that you would like to know, but maybe they are in different countries, different areas of Ireland, or just different locations. One of the areas that we have been tracking, and we produced quite a number of separate research pieces on this, I suppose, are some of the downsides of social media. And one of the areas that we've seen develop and evolve over time is that ability and that negative reaction to social media. So the statement we asked was, do you agree that you can feel overwhelmed by the use of social media or the drama of social media? And 55% of Generation Z say yes, they do, and the older generations less so. So Generation Z, as we know, have really, as I said, grown up with this social media. They were the ones that wanted to move from the likes of Facebook into Instagram, particularly Snapchat, so they can engage with their friends or whoever, but with little or no audit trail or no content that could be tracked or shared at a later date. So there's no history. So they see quite a differing engagement style of engagement with social media than the other generations. Pressure as well is coming to the fore, where we're seeing again 55% of Generation Z feeling that they have to post content that makes them look good, that makes them visually look good, particularly if you're using Instagram. And we'll talk in a few moments about using filters and Photoshop to airbrush pictures to make pictures look better or make people look better visually and physically. So again, it's a real issue that brands need to consider, not just for the people who they're engaging with, but also for how they present content. And we've seen a lot in the media recently about influencers and about models, and how pictures and images of products and brands are being filtered or being amended, and we'll see in a few moments the kind of impact and the backlash against that. We also see the popularity contest of social media. So 67% of Generation Z feel that there's pressure on them to put up comments or content that will get lots of likes. So again, you can see the dramatic difference even to Generation Y, and that's an age thing, and that will evolve over time. But again, it's something that brands need to consider if they're creating campaigns where they want different age groups to contribute content, to share content, or to engage in content. So building upon that, we've seen a lot in terms of the likes of Facebook, Google, and many media owners changing privacy and policies, and how that's important to consider when we're looking at social media. So this is when we just asked engagement with or following what types of people or brands or companies on social media. So we see across the total population, 44% don't follow anyone. But again, you can see that's really low amongst Generation Z, quite low on Y, and about 1 in 2 people in Generation X follow or don't follow somebody, so an equal balance there. The key people or organizations followed starts with starts with companies across all, and that's highest amongst Generation Z. Then brands, again highest amongst Generation Z. Celebrities, highest amongst Generation Z. Bloggers, highest amongst Generation Z. So you can see the common theme where these new age groups are really keen followers of people, brands, celebrities, and as we'll see here, the likes of influencers. And again, we'll come back to that in a little bit more detail. And then we see that little bit of shift where older generations are more likely to follow politicians, maybe famous pets and so on. But again, you'll see the key theme. So it's companies, celebrities, influencers will be the top kind of 4 or 5 in terms of what particularly Generation Z follow. One of the areas and one of the risks of organizations in terms of building such campaigns is the switch off. So again, it's great when you can get followers, it's great when you can get likes to your brand, to your organization, get them engaged with different competitions, for example. But again, it's becoming really sensitive out there in terms of switching off. So we asked what would make you or what stopped you following a person or a company on social media. And a big one is the reality, the difference between what's real and what's not real. And you can see that's really strong across all the generations, particularly strong across those Generation Z. Depending on what people are doing online, be it aggressive behavior, bullies and so on, we see that as a huge turn off. But again, for companies and brands, too much going on, too many posts, too much information, again just a flood of content and posts. The other one we would strongly recommend to brands and organizations to keep an eye on is the reality is that if your brand or your ambassador or your influencer is acting differently online than they are in reality, then that's a huge turn off for all generations and slightly higher for Generation Z. Political and religious issues to a lesser extent across the board, but again, it's unlikely that many brands or organizations will be getting involved in such discussions on their websites or on their social media accounts. So as we said, there are significant changes afoot in terms of privacy and policies regarding content and postings and social media. And again, what we see here really on the left hand side are the 2 key ones, that the vast majority don't think that the policies are strict, or as in they're too strict and they should be stricter. So we see here is that over half of all participants feel that policies need to be improved. There should be more restrictions on policies, and that's highest amongst those older age groups, particularly the Generation X's and the Bloomers. And the flip side is on the low side, we see that with Generation Z. A key one for brands and organizations to also consider is the responsibility of social media. And it's quite interesting here, if we just look at the top 2, the editors of the post and the platform. Again, quite similar, that it's most just about feel that it should be the editors of the post. Again, that's quite consistent across all age groups and all genders, as we see here. Same for the platform owners, again quite consistent across the board in terms of who's responsible and I guess who I suppose has to manage, monitor, mediate the content being posted. And we're seeing a growing interest in the regulatory authorities in terms of having that independent view in terms of managing content. And then we see here government and police to a lesser extent, but certainly the auditor of the posts and the platform. And again, for organizations and businesses, they really have to take responsibility for the content, the posts and the site, much more so than the social media owners. It's an interesting area. We looked here about this whole evolution of filters, which we see coming out a lot with social media, influencers, ambassadors, brands who have been seen as touching up images of their models or their products. However, when we ask, is it okay to use filters to improve your selfies, your own photographs to look better, 36% of everyone say yes, that's okay. Very high, over 2 in 1 of Generation Z say that's okay, and to, as you can see, a significantly lesser extent across Generation X. However, when we ask the same groups, is it okay to use filters or Photoshop to improve the look of products, we see a dramatically differing view on that. So what we're seeing here is that social media contributors are happy to update their own pictures, to maybe change their own blemishes, to improve it themselves, but don't like the idea of third parties or product owners or brand owners changing their products, which is a really stark reminder to organizations to be so careful in terms of how to present that. We ask, why is that the case? And again, it's that reality, it's that it's not real, it's fake advertising, creating unrealistic expectations, and they're huge reminders to organizations. If you're developing content, if you're developing campaigns, you need to be so careful in how you display products, how you share imagery on the likes of Instagram, and it's really, really important to remember that. Quickly flash through this. Again, there is a concern, and it's an evolving concern across all age groups, across all generations, about the likes of Facebook and Google and others using personal data to target advertising. And I think this is something that will evolve, and it will become to the fore as we start seeing maybe some more coordinated pushback from all social media users on that personal data and how it's being used in terms of advertising and media campaigns. One good point on this is we do see, particularly with Generation Z, a high proportion that do like the idea of brands that do take a stand in advertising and marketing are more appealing. So it is that believability, it is that trust in the brand, it is that brand positioning their products and their people with warts and all. And I think that's something that is key to remember, particularly if you're engaging with that younger age group, which I think are much more concerned about looks and so on. So the final section, just over the last 3-4 minutes, going to look at quickly trust in media and just finish out on influencers. And again, as I said, these slides are available. But again, what we've asked is just when we look at media, as well as recommendations, this idea of loyalty, advocacy, and so on, what stands out. And again, we see across all age groups how trust in word of mouth recommendations remains the most popular, as you'll see across the other questions, the other statements that we're going to follow up on. But again, word of mouth is always that holy grail for all product owners, brand owners, to really drive popularity in their products or brands. And you can see here trust somewhat and trust completely, really high in terms of word of mouth. Then we look at consumer opinion, and online consumer opinion, and again reasonable levels of trust somewhat, not completely amongst the Generation Y, X and those older age groups, the bloomers, but actually interesting online content and online consumer opinion reasonably highly regarded amongst those Generation Z cohort. TV ads, again, important to many organizations as part of their media campaign and balancing their media activities and media planning. And TV does still have an important role, but again significantly lower than word of mouth and so on, so at 45%. Down to 34-35% amongst those younger age groups. But again, you see that kind of flip side where you have don't trust much and trust somewhat, particularly Generation X is very close. So again, what we see, and anyone who's involved in designing or planning media campaigns will know, is that if you get a good campaign, you get a good TV ad, there is an open door for many of those age groups to really engage and really drive brand awareness and product awareness on TV. Brand sponsorship, again, we've seen the evolution, significant evolution across GAA, rugby, Irish soccer, camogie, you name it, how significant sums have been invested in sponsorship. And again, not dissimilar to TV, trust somewhat, don't trust much. Again, quite similar figures across all age groups, barring Generation X, which have a slightly higher distrust. to brand sponsorship than other age groups. But again, it's that kind of open door where if it's engaging with their interests, it's good content, maybe it's nicely integrated with social media as well as TV and so on. There is good opportunities to drive positive, effective campaigns in that space. The big difference when we see generations is online, particularly online video advertising. We've seen how popular YouTube is amongst Generation Z particularly, and if they've grown up with that platform where we've got vloggers, we've got huge influencers that live on YouTube, TV content, radio content. It's an open door for this age group in a similar way that we've seen with brand sponsorship and TV for those older age groups. So 44 and 43% being don't trust much and trust somewhat. So they're very, very similar. And again, that's an open door for advertising, particularly targeting Generation Z using online video ads. Quickly finishing up, social media, again advertising on social networks. Again, you can see of all the ones we looked at so far, the weakest, and again because people want to ensure that it's believable, it hasn't been filtered, it hasn't been photoshopped. But again, you see here that Generation Z are the ones that are most open to advertising on social media. And you can see here that significantly lower don't trust at all amongst those Y, X's and bloomers. The last couple of slides then, online banner ads. Again, you see here common themes, highest amongst Generation Z, and again not a lot of trust in comparison by those other age groups. So again, there are campaigns that work, there are ways of engaging with online banner ads, but of all we've seen so far, trust is still weaker. Search engine ads, a similar view to online ads, not as negative, and again it's kind of a flip side, so positive and negative similar. So again, more opportunity there than maybe on display ads, and again reasonably open door for Generation Z that have grown and trust online content more than the other age groups. And just to finish up then on influencers, so we see here the important role of influencers again, and we've seen over recent months and even the last couple of years where everyone wanted to use a social media influencer. Now we see a lot of backlash, a lot of negativity in some areas, but again still popular amongst those younger age groups. And we asked why do they work, why are they important? And authenticity is really important, relevance, so that's the believability. They know something, you can learn from them, they gain more, they're inspiring, and they're the key for, even compared to popularity, where we've moved away from it's just because you're a famous person to it's somebody like us. And we've seen from other research we've done, if an influencer can engage and position themselves as somebody like us that we can learn from, that what they're sharing is relevant and they're for real and the content is real, then influencers still have a big role if the content and if the campaign is engaged in a way that it's open and it's honest and it's believable. Finally, just to show what platforms are most likely used, just stepping back a second if I can, I was going to just highlight nowhere. So 41% really still don't engage or don't want to follow influencers, but the remaining 59% do. Key platforms, again, quite different to social media being used. Instagram, massively important for those younger age groups, and then it's Facebook for the rest in terms of other social media campaigns, and then the growing popularity of vloggers and people on YouTube as those that will follow. Snapchat is interesting. We've worked with some campaigns where we've had influencers running on Snapchat, and even Snapchat then bringing them through to the Instagram website in terms of engaging them on Snapchat and then bringing them to the content on Instagram. And those two are really, really good bedfellows when looking at social media and influencer campaigns targeting Generation Z. I'll skip through this, but we know that if it's not open and if an influencer isn't calling out that they are being paid to promote a product, it does have a huge negativity, and that's the big risk and the big call out for brands if they're engaging with influencer campaigns. And we've even seen it with some famous influencers only recently, that they are calling out that yes, they are being rewarded for promoting content or for influencing or recommending a brand, that they need to call it out, and that's becoming more common. Finally, just then that influencers should take more responsibility for the brands they promote, and I think that is the relevance, the believability that all social media users are calling out for. However, to finish up, which I think is the interesting part, so when the influencer works well, if it's believable, if the content is believable and not being filtered or being changed to make it look something that it's not, 47% of Generation Z have purchased a product through engagement with an influencer because it's being promoted by an influencer, and reasonably high for Generation Y at 23%. So it's hard to make work, but when it works and when people take a very honest and warts and all approach, it's still an option for promoting social media activities and promoting brands and products. So to wrap up, I've gone slightly over, apologies. So again, really we've highlighted the differences in terms of media consumption, and particularly the mix of your media, be it TV, radio, digital and social. Each generation needs to be considered differently, and we do see some key call-outs both at a technology level, a social media level, but also an attitude and awareness level, that the generations do consider brands and social media campaigns differently, as well as all media campaigns. Again, considering native advertising, particularly as that's growing in terms of sponsored content, brand ambassadors and influencers have a role, but it's important to get the right balance, to get the right content and the right approach if you are considering using ambassadors or influencers to promote your brand. And I think ultimately across all social media content, trust, relevance, believability and honesty are key for all generations in terms of media engagement. So it is that, as I said, that warts and all. What we would always recommend as a market research agency is to test your content and campaigns before launch, so really to make sure that they don't go down the wrong avenue, they don't create negativity or switch off from people you're trying to engage with, as well as measuring campaigns after the event to provide KPIs on campaign effectiveness across TV, radio, content and so on. So to wrap up, I can take any questions that come up. We are running a follow-on briefing to this in I think about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, depending on where Easter falls, where we're going to look at personas across the generations X, Y, Z particularly, and then in parallel we're also running a market research best practices briefing to help organizations that either consume market research or need to consider designing market research programs, just to give some tips in terms of how to understand and drive the methodologies. So apologies, I've gone over a couple of minutes. I will take some questions. I probably can't take too many just because of time pressures, but let me just see here. So yeah, so if you can just extend your chat window, type a question you might have, and then I can stay on the line and take a couple of questions. But again, if time pressures mean you can't do that, feel free to email myself or Ryan. My email there is bottom left, oisin.byrne@ireachhq.com. Many of you would have spoken to or emailed Ryan directly. And again, we will be sharing the content of the slides with us. So a question has come in on, sorry, the sample size, I think I mentioned already, but yeah, the omnibus we run, as I said, on average every 2 weeks. We deliver 1,000 responses across on a nationally representative basis, and then we can engage with that nationally representative audience on a range of different topics. So normally each way we include our own questions, diving into social media issues, privacy issues. If you go to our client in the news section, we produce a lot of PR and media content. We also have a blog which is updated 2 or 3 times a week, which includes new content and research from our own questions, which we include in our omnibus. So it's nice that we have an omnibus that we own, and it means that we can continually track key themes. So there's another question just on youth and teens. So yes, we did run a series of briefings during the summer of last year, where we produced a lot of content talking to age groups 15 up through 17. we have to engage with them in a very different way than we do with adults, in terms of parental approvals, content, personal details, and so on. So yeah, if you're looking for information on that, let me know. I think there was a series of 3 briefings, and we'll be able to give you access or share that content or the recordings from those presentations. So I think that's us. Thank you for your time. I hope you all found it useful. Again, apologies we've gone a little bit over, but hopefully there's been a lot in this, a lot of content which you'll be able to consume and have a look at in your own time. And as I said, please feel free to let us know if you have any questions or any needs in relation to this particular briefing. So I'll log off now, and again, let us know if you need anything. Thanks a million.